Structure of employment in India. Structure of employment. The structure of employment in India can be understood based on two characteristics. One is sector-wise structure, that is based on a distinction between organized and unorganized sector. So how many people work in the organized sector and how many people work in the unorganized sector. That is a sector-wise structure of employment in our country. Then second important classification is category-wise employment or category-wise structure of employment. What is meant by category-wise structure of employment? Here we classify the people working as self-employed, regular salaried people, and casual labor. So three categories we consider: people who are self-employed, people who are regular salaried, people who are working as casual laborers. Then the meaning of self-employment is known to all, because self-employed people are those people whose income cannot be classified as wage or salary, rent, interest, profit, like that, because they are the owners of business unit in which they are working, and they are putting their own capital, they work there. So therefore whatever they get from the factory cannot be properly classified as means in wage income, rent income, or operating surplus, like that. That means self-employment is, the self-employed people are people who get a mixed income, that's the meaning. Then regularly salaried people, we know who are the regularly salaried people: those people who work either in public sector or private sector, but they get a salary, a monthly basis salary. It does mean that their work is somewhat means guaranteed there, or their salary work is regular in nature. They get some other facilities in addition to the salary which they receive from the from the units in which they are working. So regular salaried people can come under both the public sector and private sector. And the other category is casual laborers. And these casual laborers do not have any permanent employment or regular employment. They work mostly on daily basis, and means they do not have any specific social security mechanisms like any kind of pension or any kind of paid means paid salary. Such type of perks and other social security measures are not applicable in the case of the people who are employed on casual basis or casual labors. Now, let's come to the organized and unorganized sector employment. That's the first category. That's the first thing, that is a sector-wise structure of employment: organized, unorganized. So first we define the organized sector, and once you define the organized sector, then you can understand the counterpart, that is unorganized sector. What is an organized sector? Organized sector employment refers to employment in the public sector and private sector units employing 10 or more persons. That means wage or salary in this sector are much higher than that of the unorganized sector. And the people working in this sector, they do get many other benefits. Besides salary, they get many other benefits, and their job is secured some ways, or they have the job security. So they enjoy some more benefits compared to the people who are casually employed. Now, let us look at the trends in organized sector employment in our country. So if you trace out the trends, you can see that the share of organized sector employment in total employment in India was of the order of 7.93 percentage in 1983 and in 1988. In 2 years, in 1983 and 1988, the share of the organized sector employment in our country was of the order of 7.93%. It does mean that 7.93 percentage of the people in our country, means 7.93 percent of the labor force in our country were employed in the organized sector in 1983 and in 1988 also. But that figured that that share actually declined into 7.08 percentage in 1999 2000. It does mean that during the post-reform period, there had been a continuous decline in the share of organized sector employment in our country. But we must understand that reforms actually have opened the way for more private sector investment in our country. So, in the post-reform period, there should have been an increase in the private sector employment in our country, and that did happen also. Private sector employment increased during this period, but the thing is that increase in private sector employment was not sufficient to absorb all the people who lost employment opportunities in the organized sector. So the private sector employment within the organized sector registered an increase of 1.87 percentage per annum during the post-reform period, from 1994-95 to 1999-2000. But that increase in private sector employment unfortunately was not sufficient to absorb all the labors means withdrawn from the organized sector on account of the implementation of these privatization programs. Now let us come to the second category, that is the second means structure, second structure of the employment, that is the category wise distribution of employment in India. So categories wise, as I said at the outset, there could be three kinds of categories like self-employed, regular, salaried, and casual labor. And data on category wise employment in our country has been made available for both rural and urban areas. So we have to look at the category wise employment in our country separately for rural area, urban area. Then we will see it for the whole country, that is rural urban combined. First we will see the trend in the category wise employment trend in rural area. First we will see. So therefore, the trends in category-wise employment in rural areas in India. So we will compare two periods, that is 1977-78 and 2011-12. So first we will see the picture of the self-employment. The proportion of self-employment in rural areas actually declined in 2011-2012 compared to the period 1977-78. What we see is that the proportion of self-employment in rural area was 62.6 percentage in 1977-78. 62.6% of the people that time in rural areas were employed as self-employed people, but that figure actually declined to 56% in 2011 12. That means during the reform period, or after the implementation of the reform, actually the share of the self-employed people that got declined to 56% in 2011 12. And in the case of the regular salaried workers, the share of regular salaried workers in rural areas was of the order of 7.7% in 1977-78. That slightly increased it to 9% in 2011-12. But remember that the regular salaried people also they also cover the people working in the private sector in our country. That means during this period, there might have been a decline in the public sector employment, but a simultaneous increase in the private sector employment at that time, that might have resulted in compensating to some extent the job lost in the public sector in rural areas. Perhaps because of this reason, that the share of the regular salaried workers in rural areas actually got increased from 7.7% in 1977-78 to 9% in 2011-12. Let us come to the case of the casual workers. So we see a very dismal picture as far as the casual workers are concerned. The picture is that the share of casual workers in rural area was just of the order of 29.7% in 1977-78, but that actually increased to 35% in 2011-12. It does mean that reforms have made work more casual or work more informal during the time of the means during this period. From 1977-78, 29.7% of the people were casual workers, but their figure actually shot up to 35% in 2011-12. So from this, it's very clear, obvious that the reforms have created a situation where people are becoming more and more people are becoming more and more informal workers, or they find, or they are converting themselves into what is called casual workers. And let's look at the trend categories wise trend in urban areas. A different picture we see in the urban areas. The proportion of self-employment in urban area that slightly declined, not much decline as we see in the case of the rural areas, but here they slightly declined from 42.4% in 1977-78 to 42% in 2011-12. It does mean that self-employed people are still in urban areas, that half of the people in the urban areas are still self-employed people. But coming to the case of the regular salaried workers, we see a different picture because share of the regular salaried workers in urban areas slightly increased from 41.8% in 1977-78 to 43% in 2011-12. That means in urban areas, more works have become formalized, or more works have become somewhat regularized in the urban areas. That is perhaps because of the coming up of more investment in the private sector. And and third point we see is that the casual workers in urban areas was of the order of 15.8% in 1977-78, but that also showed a slight decline to 15% in 2011-12. So from the urban picture, is that in the case of the self-employment, the figure the figure slightly declined from 42.4% to 42%. It means that still more people in the urban areas are finding employment as self-employed people, but regular salaried workers, their number, their share has shown a slight increase. That's a good sign because the reforms might have brought in more private investment, at least in urban areas in our country. And but the share of casual workers in urban areas actually still continues to be so, because it only slightly declined from 15.8% in 1977-78 to 15% in 2011. Let's come to the combined figure, or all over India figure, related to this category wise employment structure in India. So trends in category wise employment, rural urban area combined. And what we see is that the proportion of self employment for the country as a whole slightly declined from 58.9% in 1977-78 to 52% in 2011-12. So, in short, self employment has actually come down. That's very clear. Self employment has come down in our country. Second point is related to the salaried workers. The share of salaried workers in urban areas slightly increased from 13.9% in 1977-78 to 18% in 2011-12. That's a good increase. Of course, that's a good increase because around 5.5% increase had been registered. That's a good sign because the reforms actually, it's obvious that reforms have brought in certain kind of regular works, at least in the private sector in our country. That's why the regular salaried workers, the share of regular salaried workers for the country as a whole, registered an increase from 13.9% in 1977-78 to 18% in 2011-12. Let's come to the last point, that is the casual workers. The share of casual workers in urban areas and rural areas together, in urban and rural areas together, actually increased from 27.2% in 1977-78 to 30% in 2011. That's a good sign because for the country as a whole also the share of casual workers in urban areas increased. So that means reforms have made the number of casual workers increased, or there has been an increase in the number of the casual workers in India following the neoliberal policies. But at the same time, the self-employed people's share actually went down during the period under this study.